What's up, everybody? My name is Idris Solomon. I'm an art director, photographer, filmmaker, and podcaster based in Brooklyn, New York. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my project Blackbirds. I'm going to be sharing some of my experiences, some of the things that I've learned, and just overall what that project has done for me in my life as a creative and just as an observer of culture. I had no idea or no clue on how I would become a professional photographer, but what I would do is choose to focus on stories in the Black community, stories that were important to me, stories that were not being told. And this opportunity came for me to photograph at the Dance Theater of Harlem. There was an event happening, and it was basically a performance for friends and family. So the dancers who had been rehearsing for weeks were putting on a show for their loved ones. And when I got there, I was instructed that I had about 3 feet of space to stand and photograph the dance, the performance that was happening. I was more interested in the culture. So when the person who told me I had that 3 feet of space to photograph, when they turned around and walked away, I basically got up and went backstage, and I was walking all around the school in places I probably shouldn't have gone. But I was looking for part of the story that I thought was interesting. So one of the philosophies that I choose to live my life by is to bend the rules before I break them, but I always bend them. And basically, when I start out somewhere new, I get a sense of the environment. So in a situation like approaching the Blackbirds project, they gave me that 3 feet of space to photograph, and I abided by that. I took a few photos of the performance happening right there in front of my face. And like I said, when that person got up and walked away, I started to inch closer and closer to the place that I wanted to be, where I thought the real action, the interesting photos were taking place. But I didn't immediately break the rules. I think that it would have been irresponsible for me to be there and have them expect certain type of photos from me and me not deliver those. So I made sure that I delivered the photos that they were expecting, but I went a few extra steps further and gave them photos that I don't think that they were paying attention to. The more I showed up at this school during their performances, during their rehearsals, one thing that was common is that the dancers usually are dressed the same, very similarly, unless it's a special type of performance. When I started to recognize that there was this commonality in how the dancers presented themselves, that kind of lent itself to opportunities for me to focus in on those similarities. So if you pay attention to like everything being the same and similar, and then that one person is doing something that's slightly different, that adds a little bit more interest and intrigue, But there's also something to be said about capturing something that is completely uniform. One thing I always do is find ways to bond over common interests. Photography is a lot more than just a picture. Photography, for me, is being able to capture emotion. And if I'm able to show you an image that resonates with you because it's something that you may have experienced before in your own life, or something that you've never experienced, but you're seeing something in a way that allows you to feel connected to another human being, then that's that similarity that I'm looking for. And that's what I try to capture in my images. I'm an only child. I grew up with a lot of time on my hands, a lot of space. And, I'm a big believer in taking personal space. So as a photographer, I look for those moments where I can capture somebody that in isolation. And I look for moments where I can capture a quiet moment where somebody is like deep in thought or contemplating something, or they choose to take a step away from the crowd and take some time for themselves. I like to pay attention to those moments because as humans, we all need those moments when we're not on, when we're not performing for anybody else. So one aspect of my photography that I choose to focus on is taking space and giving space. There's moments when the camera doesn't need to be in somebody's face. The camera doesn't even need to be seen. There's times when most times I capture people's photos without them even knowing that I'm taking their picture because I don't want to disturb the moment. If I'm able to just really be a fly on the wall, if I'm able to get in and get out like a ninja without people even knowing that I was there, then that means for me, I did my job. I think it's important to acknowledge hard work and effort. And capturing and documenting something as seemingly delicate as ballet. And one of the earliest memories of me photographing this project was arriving to the studio for a rehearsal and seeing these young ladies bandaging up their feet. Their feet are like beat up and bruised and bleeding and sore, and they've been dancing on their toes for like hours, and then they're bandaging up their feet so that they can continue dancing, can continue rehearsing. And in that moment, you know, I thought it was important to photograph their bandaged and bruised feet because that's showing the outside world that although ballet can be really delicate and beautiful, there's a lot of hard work and pain and sacrifice that goes into performing at that level. On the first day that I showed up to Dance It of Harlem to begin photographing this project, I witnessed an instructor giving these young dancers some real tough love. And these are all young black and brown ladies at the time. And this instructor was making sure that she instilled in them a level of work ethic and pride, and you know, she wouldn't let them off the hook easily. If they didn't do their best job, they knew that they didn't do their best job and that they were lying to themselves. And this instructor made sure that they weren't allowed to lie to themselves. They weren't allowed to let themselves off the hook easily. So when I saw that, when I witnessed that, that let me know that I was on the right track with this project because I wanted to capture that energy. I wanted to capture that sense of pride and that sense of worth and that sense of esteem that this instructor was instilling in these young people. I wanted to capture at one of the big performances for the Dance Theater of Harlem. I was able to witness this young man, this young boy, who wasn't a man, this young boy experiencing a level of stage fright that was just, it was just so emotional. This young boy was just like falling apart, and everybody tried to console him, and they're trying to like calm him down, and he's so scared and so nervous to get on stage and perform. And then I was in the front of the stage, and I'm not really paying attention. I'm just, you know, focusing on capturing these moments. And in my viewfinder, in my camera, I see the young boy who was backstage crying uncontrollably. I see him on stage dancing. And I sat there and I was like, wow, he made it. This little dude made it. And that made me feel happy because I was able to witness his emotions shift. You know, he was crying uncontrollably in a corner at one moment, scared to death. And then the next moment he was on stage with that big light shining on him. Sometimes all we need to do in this world is to keep it moving. When I say keep it moving, it means that whatever it is that you're trying to do, whatever goals you have, just chip away at it. You know, slow motion is better than no motion. And the reason why that applies to this project is because most people, when they think of dance and ballet, they think of the movement part. the eloquent part, you know, the jumps and the spins and all of those things, which is cool. Those are the exciting moments. But sometimes I like to slow things down and focus on the moments that happen in between the exciting moments. Everything can't be moving rapid speed all the time. What happens when things slow down? Pay attention to that, you know, because there's always magic when things slow down. I think that whatever we're doing in this world, in this lifetime, we always need to celebrate ourselves. I think that in this age of social media, there's a lot of need for external validation. And one thing that I learned in this project was that it is important to celebrate ourselves. You know, one thing that drew me to this project was telling the story of how a young person goes from being interested in dance at the age of 4 to becoming like a world-renowned dancer. And those stories are often untold. So I wanted to help tell this story so that young dancers will look at these photos and see all the work that these young people have been putting in, so that one, they're not disillusioned. They understand that there's a lot of work and effort that goes into, you know, being really good at this craft. But two, knowing that there is a universal struggle in trying to reach a level of greatness that we all share, you know. As photographers, being home, I just encourage you to look closer at your environment. Look a little bit deeper into the space that you're in. Look at your family members from a different perspective. Try to notice things about them that you didn't notice before. Look around your space and ask yourself if you've ever really paid attention to the things that are in your life, the objects that are in your life, the people that are in your life, the emotions that you feel when you look at some of these people or some of these things. And if you're able to shift the perspective on your world that is closest to you right now, then you're on your way to becoming a really good photographer, because you don't have to travel the world, go to the other side of the planet in order to find a story. If you're able to stay grounded in the space that you're in and find an interesting story right there in your room, in your bedroom, or in your living room, or in your bathroom, wherever. If you're able to find an interesting story there, then you can make a story anywhere. So I encourage you to take a deep breath, slow down, pause, maybe do a 360 rotation, like physically do a spin in your room slowly, and just look at all the different things that are there and ask yourself what is interesting about those things or those people in your life, and then choose to photograph that in your own voice. As you approach your long-term projects, there comes a point where you need to take a look at your work and ask yourself if it's progressing. You need to ask yourself, is this the story that I really want to tell? And it's a challenge, because being super hypercritical of our own work is sometimes the most challenging, because we are connected to it. We are so emotionally invested and connected in our work that sometimes it's hard to take a real honest look at the work that we're creating. And I challenge you to do your best to remove the emotion from your work, from the individual photograph. Say if you spent hours and hours and hours waiting for something to happen for you to photograph it, and you photograph that event, but then when you look at the photo, it's not particularly a strong photo as itself, by itself it's not a strong photo, but when you look at that image, you remember and the emotions that you felt of having to wait so long in order to capture that photo. So to you, that photo is important because you have a personal connection. You have a personal backstory to that photo. But when I look at that photo, all I see is the photo. And I don't see your emotion behind it. I don't see the long hours that you waited to capture that photo. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge that I face. It's a challenge that my colleagues face. Any professional photographer faces. And there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of situations where photographers would reach out to a fellow photographer to take a look at the work and say, hey, I'm too close to this work. Can you take a look at this and just flag any photos that seem out of place or that don't feel like as strong? And that's okay. You know, lean on your peers, lean on your classmates, lean on people who have more experience than you do and get their opinions, you know. But in the end, remember that it's your body of work. And, you know, so sometimes it helps to listen to somebody else's opinion who has more experience. And sometimes you may feel really, really strongly and really deeply about a decision to keep a certain photo in. And that's your choice as well. I've had so many failures in this life. Being fired from jobs unfairly sometimes, and sometimes it was due to poor performance. And I've been fired from jobs in ways that have made me feel really low and made me question my worth, question my value. It made me question society, like, was I unfairly targeted? So what I learned from those early failures, quote unquote failures, is that all I really have control over is my own effort, my own output, my work ethic, my focus, my determination, my discipline. Those are things that I have control over. And if I am able to outwork, you know, my counterparts, if I study my craft, if I study my craft and I work on constantly improving every single day, then that's nothing that could be taken away from me. So much power in photography. So much. And I wish that I could tell you that I remember, that I grew up in a house full of cameras and that my mother was a photographer and I always watched her taking pictures. And I wish I had like a story to tell about the first camera that I ever got and how I fell in love with it. And I don't have those stories. So for me, I discovered the power of photography by choosing to tell stories in the Black community. And that was important for me because we live in a society that still to this day does not have as much diversity and inclusivity as it should. And because I witnessed this lack of diversity, this lack of inclusion, it felt like a responsibility for me to use my camera to tell these stories. I have this camera, I have this toolkit, I have this skill set that I can use to help close the gap of diversity and inclusion. And as a Black man with a camera telling stories in a Black community, I'm able to at least contribute part of my voice to a larger legacy. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you learned from my experiences photographing the Blackbirds Project. I hope that you are inspired. I hope that you find creativity in places where you've never expected to find creativity, especially in your own homes, in your own neighborhood, in your own community, within yourself. And, you know, I hope that you stay safe and, you know, ride this wave until we're able to be in public with each other again in a healthy way. My name is Idris Talib Solomon. Thank you for tuning in and, listening to me speak about my experience with the Blackbirds Project. And again, I hope that you were able to take something good away from this. Peace.